All right, we can start anytime. We can start right now.
All right, we've officially started.
Explosion.
Hey, this is Richard Zombek, and you're listening to Buds with Suds. You can hear us on iTunes, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and Stitcher. Also, if you'd like to leave us a voicemail with a comment, suggestion, complaint, insult, you can do that at 978-219-9554, and I may play it on the next podcast. In this episode, number 15, I spoke with Maureen Cavanagh. She is an advocate for families of people with substance use disorders. She's also a podcaster herself and a best-selling author. Her book, If You Love Me, A Mother's Journey Through Her Daughter's Opioid Addiction, can be found on Amazon and Google Books. And you can find a link to it under this podcast at budswithsuds.com. She's also the founder of Magnolia New Beginnings. That link can also be found on the website, and the Collateral Damage podcast, and her latest podcast, Taking Back Your Life. Maureen and I have known each other for about 3 years, probably a little more. We've met for coffee, talked on the phone, commiserated and complained, and it was great to just go up to Reading and find her in her office and sit down for an hour and have a little chat with her. So here's that conversation. All right, Maureen Cavanagh, welcome to Buds with Suds.
Thank you very much for having me.
So a little background here. I was trying to figure out on the ride over here how long we've known each other. And I want to say it's when I was working at Bridgewell and RCA.
Yes.
So it's probably
Well, it's before you worked at RCA.
Okay. So
because I was working at RCA and I gave you a tour.
That's right. So it's been almost 3 years.
Holy Christmas. Really?
Yeah, we've known each other that long.
Wow.
And here's the thing. This is what I was thinking about on the way over, right? Is you and I have gone to coffee. We've been on phone calls together. We've texted back and forth. We've done a lot of talking over the last 3 years. And I have very little knowledge about what you do. Right?
Okay. And we should probably keep it that way.
I mean,
it's working.
This is what I do know. You've written a book. You got into this whole recovery area because of your daughter. You wrote a book about that experience. Mm-hmm. You started Magnolia New Beginnings as a result of that.
Well, funny that you should say that, because I actually started Magnolia New Beginnings in 2012, which was before all of that happened. I guess.
Well, let's start there.
Okay. So I was teaching. I was a special education teacher teaching in the middle school, which right before I taught in the middle school, I taught in the jail. And it was actually often that the people in the jail were much friendlier and kinder to me than the people in the middle school. But
taught what?
I am just special education, any subject, but I have specializations in reading and language-based learning disabilities. So that's basically what I was doing, and I realized that the more I learned and the more credentials I got in education, the less time I spent with the kids. And I really went back to school. This was a second master's degree. So I went back to school to teach because I love kids and because I wanted to teach, but I wound up doing nothing but paperwork. And I thought, you know what? The first master's degree was in public administration, nonprofit management. What I thought I was going to do is start a business and a nonprofit. And in the nonprofit, I wouldn't be doing paperwork. I would be doing things that actually made a difference. So Magnolia New Beginnings was initially supposed to be a fresh start for anybody, or a little help with a fresh start for anybody that was overcoming anything. So I knew it would be a lot of people with substance use disorder. That was a no-brainer. It was people that were coming back from that. But I also thought that maybe it would be people that maybe had just gotten divorced, or they had had some other kind of illness, or maybe they had just come into the country and they were trying to, get on their feet. So that was what it was supposed to be in 2012. It evolved into trying to provide a fresh start for anybody for somebody who was affected by a substance use disorder, primarily with housing, and then also with the the support groups, which we now have over 20,000 people in the Magnolia addiction support groups.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That are on Facebook, and they're closed support groups. We have an open group too, but that anybody can see. But the closed groups, people have to join, and they hopefully get help and support and resources with, very easily, no cost. We vet these groups and try very, very hard not to have anybody that works in treatment or anybody that's going to push their treatment center or their particular
You let me in.
You're a good guy.
I'm in there. But I try to stay really quiet just because I don't have. That's one of the things that kind of where you and I differ, and we were talking about this right before the show, right? Is that when you announced your podcast, which is Collateral Damage.
Yeah.
Right. And,
actually, I have two. So Collateral Damage is out now, and there's another one coming up called Taking Back Your Life, which is going to be more of two moms sitting down talking about things.
Okay. Taking Back Your Life is a lot more positive than Collateral Damage. You should have some ominous music with that. Dun, dun, dun.
But it really is about all the collateral damage of addiction.
I know.
And, we have people coming on talking about the other aspects that a lot of times people aren't thinking about.
Well, and that's the thing, right? So I get on Magnolia every once in a while on the Facebook pages, and I comb through them and stuff. And I try to stay quiet because I don't have a lot to say. Because you and I deal in very different. So what I was alluding to was the conversation we had before. Is that I had a couple people text me and call me. And it's like, oh, you got competition now. Maureen's got her. Yeah, and it's like we deal in very different areas. Right? Is you really deal with the collateral damage, right? The families and also what I was noticing too is there's a exponential number of women over men on those pages too. Am I wrong about that?
No, I would say it's probably about 90%. Unfortunately, I wish there were more men.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's a lot more women on those pages than anything else, and that it seems more to be. I mean, you have a lot of answers and you have a lot of people with very good answers, but it's also very supportive of the community of people who have active addiction running in their families. Yeah,
I mean, our groups are basically somebody who is supporting a loved one.
Right.
So, it's usually moms. That's usually who it is. But we have brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles and fathers and, we have everybody on there. There's some representation from every possible husbands, wives. But I think that the majority of people on there are moms.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it seems like. And then so you had originally, the idea of Magnolia was basically overall help for anyone, right?
Yeah.
It was kind of,
the Facebook group.
It was kind of open-ended.
It was, because I wasn't sure exactly what I was doing, what I was going to do. I was teaching, volunteering in an ESLL program and teaching recent immigrants to speak English or to help them learn how to speak English. So I saw a lot of people with a lot of potential in there, and they were working some awful job because they needed, maybe $500 just to get whatever started. And I thought, what a great thing to do would be able to be like, this gift of, let's put a business plan together and let's, figure out what you need and get you going. But it just never turned into that because my whole entire life went off the rails when my daughter started, when I found out that she was using drugs.
How did it morph into being basically strictly substance use?
So probably for about 2 years, it was nothing. It was, the whole world stopped for me for a short time before I really had any idea what to do or who to talk to or, any kind of support myself. And then I saw what a gaping hole there was in a bunch of different places what that I experienced when I was looking for help for my daughter. So there was Learn to Cope, and thank God for Learn to Cope. But Learn to Cope for me was on Thursday nights,
right?
And that was for 1 hour. So in between, every other day of the week, 24 hours a day, I needed to ask people questions. So I started to connect with people because that's just how I am. People gave me their phone number and I used it. Where, sometimes people feel uncomfortable doing that. I didn't care. I was calling everybody, asking everybody the same questions over and over again until I got a consistent response, and then I figured that was the truth.
Like what? I mean, I know that's a really open-ended question, but
At that time, there were very few places in Massachusetts. So I was looking for a place for my daughter to go to treatment. Then I was looking for a place for her to go to sober living. Then I was going, but I also just needed somebody to lie to me and tell me it was going to be okay.
Right.
I just needed another person that was going through the same thing, and not always just on a Thursday night. So I created this group so that people could connect with each other, because there were other groups like that, but none where you could share information. There was one large national group that really frowned upon anybody sharing information or saying, my child went here and it was a nightmare. You couldn't say that. And on Magnolia, I'm good. As long as it's the truth, then I think that people have the right to their opinion, and as long as we're not purposely hurting anybody else. So I think that I created the thing that I needed in those parent support groups, and it's been very successful, and I think it's helped a lot of people. But I also saw my daughter was fortunate because we had good insurance, and we also were able to help her when she wanted to get into sober living. But I saw lots of people that were going through treatment. As I connected more and more with people, I learned a lot about this business. I just because I'm a researcher, you know what I mean? So I found out that I tried.
I wouldn't know what that's like.
So you know what I mean? Like it wasn't enough to know a little. I had to know everything.
Yeah.
So, and I certainly don't know everything, but I tried. And I found all these people going into treatment and coming out, because thank goodness in Massachusetts, we actually can get into a detox if we need to. And very often we can get into a CSS or a clinical stabilization or whatever you want to call it, much more easily than people in the rest of the country. But after that, very often that's the end of the road. And people were going through all of this, and they were determined, and this was going to be different. And then they were going back out to the same couch they were sleeping on, or they were going to a shelter.
Right.
And I thought, this is what I want to change, because my background previously in another life, when I was doing that first master's degree in nonprofit management, my focus was housing. So I worked in homelessness prevention programs, and I understand that really you can't do anything if you don't have a safe place to live. Everything else is, that's that Maslow's hierarchy, right? We have to have food and safety.
Basic needs.
Exactly.
Right? Roof over your head, food, clothes, right? And a little cash in your pocket.
Right. So if you don't know where you're going to sleep that night, or if the place that you're sleeping is dangerous and not sober, no matter how well you did in that treatment program or how motivated you are, it becomes extremely difficult to keep that going.
Well, and it's interesting that you bring that up, and this is a bit of a sidebar, but possibly previous to this episode, the episode 14, I think, I did an interview with Keith Scott up at Advocates in Framingham, and they're finding the kind of what you're talking about, but that it's getting progressively worse, right? Mental health issues and disability claims and alcoholism and drug use is getting worse because of the socioeconomic pressures, right? Is that our society has become more difficult to live in, right? And I brought this up with him also. Is there was an article in the New Yorker, and I think I have a link to it on the website. And the article was interesting because the guy who wrote it was postulating and opining wildly about opioids and the current crisis and stuff. But there was one sentence that stood out, was that most people who try opioids for the first time never realize up until that point how miserable they were, right? And we live in a very difficult society, right? And all of that pressure. And when you look at other countries who provide a certain base level of food, shelter, economic stability, right? Not a lot. Right? I don't need a lot to live.
Right.
I'm pretty happy for the most part, and I still have a little bit of money, but I'm not miserable. Right? I have a car that works. I have a roof over my head, and I have food on the table. Right? And my basic needs are met, along with healthcare. Right? And so, the kind of stuff you're talking about is giving someone the stability. I mean, you're talking about a little more, is going back to that environment that was toxic that you used in, right? So those habits are already formed, and trying to find them a safer and secure and more secure place once they get out and they've detoxed and they're quote unquote free of whatever substance they were using, right?
Yeah, I mean, this should be a no-brainer. You know what I mean? I just like, what don't we understand about this? That, I mean, and very often these are very young people. So they don't, and they're, you know, that have no place to go after this. So I think it seems to me like really a simple concept.
When you say very young,
I mean, most of the people that call me are in their 20s. That's
okay.
the great majority of people are in their 20s.
Yeah. So
some are older, but you know, and some are younger. But the great majority are in their mid to late 20s.
Wow. Okay.
So, and they've very often never really. Some of them have never even held a job. Yet we want them to go find some safe place to live, and we want them to stop it now. You know,
stop doing drugs and become a responsible member of society.
Right, but we don't want to help them do that.
Yeah, but this is the thing, right? And again, not to bring up Keith Scott again, but this is like, you know, we are told over and over and over again in this industry, wow, you're doing revolutionary things. It's like, what, caring about people?
I know.
You know, really?
I don't get it.
Putting a roof over their head, making sure that they're eating, you know, having dry clothes, right? Maybe, you know, whatever. Here's some skills that you might want to learn. Let's take some time and learn them.
Imagine that if we paired that up. That's what I would love to be able to do, is to pair that with the housing.
And funny you should mention that, because you called me 2 or 3 weeks ago with some interest in recovery coaching and incorporating that right into Magnolia. So how does that look? Like in an ideal world, right? How does recovery coaching? What I'm curious about is, how do you pair this up? How do you use it in your current model, right? What are you hoping for? And this isn't a quiz. It's just I'm curious about how in your head.
Yeah.
Which I think is a terrifying place to be.
It's horrifying.
If you're anything like me, is
what's that expression? You don't walk a mile in my shoes. Spend 5 minutes in my head.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm curious, when you start thinking about this and what it looks like. What does that look like? I think it's a fabulous idea. By the way, the logistics of it is what I'm kind of getting at here, I think.
All right. So if this was my child, and this is how I think, if this is my child, what would I do? I would say, and my child has come to me, and the whole world is different, and everybody else sees it, and they've had this change of heart, and they're determined. Now, what I wouldn't do is tell them, you know what, make your own way, get out on the street. Is what I wouldn't do. What I would say is, I will help you get started. Let me give you a couple of weeks in a sober house. Let me pair you with somebody who's walked down this road before and has come to the other side of it, and let them help you figure out where to get your license, where to get some ID, where to maybe start on preparing a resume, where to just get your basic, your basic needs met. Maybe like my child did, lose all of your clothes over and over again. So maybe you don't even have anything to go to an interview in. Let me have somebody help you sort these things out. Let's go and in my imagination, there's a place where, and there are places, there are career centers all over, but somebody who's been using drugs since they're 15 may not know that there's a career center that you can go into, and they're run by the state, and you can register, and they will help you find a job or training or what other things that are available to you, or mass rehab or any of those places. I would like somebody to help guide that person into services that are already out there that they may not be able to find. And I would like them to do that while they're living someplace safe and eating 3 meals a day and going to meetings and surrounded by other people that are sober and on the same journey.
You're talking about taking care of people in our society?
I know. What a novel idea, right? It's something.
This is the thing, right? This is what's always shocking. And it's how is this anything new or groundbreaking or revolutionary, right? And it's really not, right? I mean, peer support has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, right? Of one person guiding another, one person who's been there. I say it all the time. The most important thing I ever heard in an AA meeting or in recovery was "me too." right? I'm not talking about #MeToo. I'm talking,
No, it's the truth, and
but
that's
it's
the
like-
same thing
it's
in
like,
our groups.
I know exactly how you're feeling, and there is something. I'm going to get a little sappy, but there's something that happens. There's something that is completely tangible and palatable, or palpable rather, right? Of like I know that, right? When someone tells me they know how I feel because they've been there, I know that, and I also know when someone's BSing me, right? And you just know it, and I think also the longer you're sober and the longer you're away from those numbing effects.
Right.
The more intense that becomes, because that to me, and this is my theory alone, or maybe not my theory alone, but it's a working theory, is that sensation and those feelings and that ability to tune into that kind of stuff is exactly the reason that I drank, right? Because I was overly sensitive. I was too in tune, and I felt too much, and I felt everything, and all of the groups that I came up in, and you and I have had this conversation, and I know it strikes a nerve with you, is super sensitive, impending doom, unfounded, ungrounded fear, right, is what makes me who I am and was the reason that I drank. And when I have that conversation with someone who's been there after me, not before me and has longer sobriety than me, but when I talk to someone who's new and I talk to them like I'm talking to you right now, I can see it, just like I can see it with you. And I know that your identification isn't personal. Your identification is from knowing your daughter and what she's like.
And so many other people.
Right.
And I anybody that's ever heard me speak, I always make a point of saying this, and I had the opportunity to make a point of saying this with all of the police and security staff from Mass General at one of their conferences, and with a large pharmaceutical company that manufactures Vivitrol. I got to say this, and it was so important for me to say it, but it's basically what you just said, is that we want to think that this person that gets addicted to an opioid that we see, maybe hanging out someplace on Mass Ave, panhandling or nodding out, we want to think that they are somehow different from our children because we're scared. We're scared. And if they're different, then this can't happen to us. And I think that that's where a lot of the stigma comes from. It comes from fear. But I tell anybody that will listen, the people that I meet, and I know this is definitely describes my daughter, and this describes probably 95% of the people that I come in contact with, and I talk to a lot of people that are struggling. They're the kindest, the sweetest, the most empathetic, the people that feel everything, the people that are not born with that hard outer shell that some people just have naturally.
Funny as hell, too.
Yep. Some people just have that shell naturally, and some people develop it. But these people are like the turtle out of the shell, and everything hurts them, and not just their own stuff. Matter of fact, usually they're not worried about themselves. They're worried about everybody else. And the world is such a hard place to live if that's who you are. And as you said, it's getting harder and harder to live in this world.
Yeah,
so you have to have.
Why wouldn't you drink or use?
Right. That's really the question: is
like
why
that
doesn't
all the
everybody?
time.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and I've had conversations with some of the spiritual advisors at the organization I work. Right, and they asked me to come in and talk to them about spirituality, and I was like, "Well, you're the experts on this, right?" And see if you identify with part of what I'm saying here, because this is where it gets a little hokey and interesting, right? And it's like, once you understand us, right, you understand the rest of humanity, because we wear existential angst on the outside, right?
That's a great way of putting it.
Everyone has this, right? But you can go home and have a glass of wine or a beer and be fine, right? Most people can, right? The rest of us, it's like that. We start down that road and we're never coming back. Right. But that question that you have about your life, the one that pops up every once in a while, like it probably happened in your 20s and your 30s, every once in a while it pops up and you get that little, ugh, what is that, right? That's the angst. That's the humanity in us, right? And if you were to wear that on the outside, That's how I feel about alcoholism and addiction, right? Elliot Dasher, who's a doctor on Martha's Vineyard, wrote a long paper. It's also up on Recovery Binder, where he said all addiction is an erroneous path to spiritual awakening, right? And it's like that look that you're looking for something. You're looking, right? And we all do it. It's human nature, right? It's part of the human condition. But when it hurts, like you said, a turtle without its shell, when it hurts and you find a solution, right? Because I hear it all the time in meetings, right? I had my first drink. I found what I'd always been looking for. Did you?
Well, you found out how not to feel like that anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So then when you get sober, you return to that, right? And I had a friend who used to say that when I got sober, they told me I was going to be returned to the person I was before I drank.
Oh, how scary.
And that was not good news to me.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So then you have to learn about who and what you are, right? So the stuff that you're talking about to get back, I think I warned you about this. I go off.
No, I like the way you go off.
But what you were talking about it's the stuff that happens afterwards, right?
Exactly.
It's the security of knowing that I'm going to be okay, that I've got a roof over my head, that I've got dry clothes to wear, that I have clean, even a clean pair of socks, right? That I'm going to be able to eat. That concern no longer exists, right? So and this is not just your group, but when I see support groups and people are talking about tough love and warnings and ultimatums, and now that you're out of detox, you got to get your, I can't say it, but together.
I can say it.
I'll have to beep it out. We're trying to keep a clean show.
Okay.
I don't want to get banned from iTunes. And that kind of stuff, right? Basically what you're saying is you've been such a disappointment until this point. You finally cleaned up your act. Now you need to get your together, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people do that. And
Yeah.
I see it in Al-Anon. I see it in Learning to Cope. I see it some of the people on Magnolia. And the revolutionary part of it is, how do you show another human being compassion who's sick, spiritually, emotionally, and mentally, right? And take that to a level of, what do you want to do and how can I help?
You mean like holding space for somebody, like just being there and meeting them where they're at?
Yeah.
That's what we have to do. And it's hard, because it's hard when you're a family, because you feel you're a family member, you feel like you have to do something. If I say this magic thing, and I was guilty of that when my daughter was in the middle of this, if I say this magic thing, then she'll stop. So I would talk to her and say lots of things, none of them magical, until she couldn't stand to talk to me anymore, because I was so scared. I felt like I had to do something, and I think that people feel like that. They've heard that this works, this tough love thing, and, they're going to, they don't know the difference between having boundaries and tough love.
Yeah, but where do they hear that?
It's not from me, I can tell you that.
No, but do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I always try to, and I think that I can't tell somebody else how to raise.
Like, who's the idiot that came up with that idea? No, seriously.
I don't know, because what I hear lots of people say, well, I'm cutting them off. I'm not talking to them until they have 6 months of sobriety. Are you kidding me? Seriously? Your child could be dead by then. You know what I mean? And you really want the last thing you say to your child is, I am not talking to you until you're fixed.
Right.
I don't understand. And what
does that mean, right? What does that mean to be fixed, right? It's
well, it would be their version of fixed, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, this is a conversation that we have over and over and over again. And I think, I'm assuming I'm going to assume that because you're on this show, you're going to post this show on your site.
I am.
And so for people who have listened to this show extensively, they're going to know this statistic. And I'm going to say it again for most of the people who will be listening to this because of you. Marty Walsh and the mayor of Boston, and Mike McGovern, I think is his name. He's the mayor of Cambridge, and Mary Lou Sutter, who's the head of Health and Human Services for the state of Massachusetts. all went up to Vancouver to look at safe injection sites and harm reduction, right? Interesting little trip, right? But one of the statistics that they came back with, which I think is important for everyone to hear, particularly mothers, people with families in this situation, doctors and nurses in the ER, anyone who's dealing with someone with addiction, 91%, listen to me very carefully, 91% of people who are in active addiction or alcoholism, if they are offered help, want it. Okay? Compare that to every other medical diagnosis. High cholesterol, obesity, diabetes. How many people are willing to make a life change?
Very few.
Right. People who are in this, the majority of people who are in this, I didn't want to be in it. I drank and smoked around the clock for 20 years. And I couldn't stop.
My guess is the other 9% just can't picture their life ever recovering their life, and that's why they don't want it.
Or they like it the way it is.
It's possible.
I know some perfectly well-adjusted heroin users that are.
So do I.
They'll buy a bag in the morning and they'll go on about their day, and they'll maintain, and then others use heroin alcoholically. That's a whole other story. But those are the ones that shoot 35 bags a day, and I have a friend like that too. I have a friend who was sober almost a year. He came back to Marblehead for a visit. He got drunk, fell down a flight of stairs, and broke his hip, and he's in a rehab right now. One night, right? And this continues, and that's the frustration, right? That's the frustration that people get into of like, when are you going to get this? Do you even know what there is to get?
What I worry about is the people that aren't paying attention to. Yes, we may have lots of relapses. And this may be a long road, and at the end of the road, it may not turn out the way you want it to turn out. But you have all of this in the middle, where you could be telling this person how much you love them,
right?
And just being there in a way that whatever it is that they can tolerate at the time, and that you can tolerate at the time. It doesn't mean you have to give them money. It doesn't mean you have to take them and buy them drugs or pay for their cars or anything like that. That's not what I'm talking about. But you can love somebody while they're sick and hope that it isn't always this way.
And that's probably one of the most difficult parts of this on both sides. And I've had conversations. I did a couple of the Schwartz rounds at the hospital, and I've talked to ED staff and things like that. Is you treating me like a piece of crap when I'm drunk or in the ED?
Right.
It's no surprise to me. You're not gonna hurt me or convince me of anything. All you're doing is confirming what I already know about myself.
Right. The surprise would actually be
exactly
right.
Exactly.
Being treated kindly.
If you show me some compassion and kindness and treat me like a human being, now you've disarmed me.
Right.
Now you've made it difficult for me to be difficult.
Such a lost opportunity when we don't do that in those very pivotal moments in someone's life.
Yeah. So back to the topic at hand, like we didn't know we were going to go off on a tangent. The recovery coaching part of I'm curious how you see it working with parents involved and teens and middle 20s and stuff that are still, because this is what I see a lot. Okay, and as a recovery coach, I see kids of that age, right? And I know, you're all going to say you're women and men, but if you're under 30, you're a kid.
Right, that's, yeah.
And your parents probably see you that same way, right? Is they want to get involved. I get more calls from the mothers than I do from the kids themselves when I have people that are referred at that age, right? And you're not dealing in your organization, you're not dealing with the same kind of guidelines. I can say, listen, HIPAA.
Right.
I can't talk to you, HIPAA.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you see that? Like I said, I think it's a wonderful idea. I want to see it in action. I want to see it work.
Yeah, me too.
And I want to see it happen because the thing is that once you think of the identification that you get from me when I talk to you about how I think and feel. Right, and you relate that to your daughter because you know her well, right?
And my whole family, because I come from an entire family of addiction.
Oh, okay, all right.
So there's no one, just me.
So
you're looking at it.
So you get it.
Yeah, I'm the only one that doesn't have the disease. Only I think, and I can't help but think that I don't have it so that I can do something about it, so that I'm actually able to do what I'm doing from my perspective, because who knows what would have happened if I would have had it. I might not be here.
Right. And I think someone that has the same kind of thought process and thinking and feeling is, I see it every day. I run not every day, I see it, but I do see it every day. But I also run a group on Tuesday nights. And I have some people that are very determined to think that I'm wrong. And then they've come around slowly. They're like, oh, wow, you actually, the unfounded, ungrounded fear, I get it now. You're right. I can't control my thinking, right? And it's, how did you do it, right? This is, and it's not, here's what I did. Do, if you want what I have, do what I do. It's like, let's look at, we're uniquely qualified to address this situation because we are this situation. So I think your idea of kind of removing the assistance from the family and involving recovery coaches into your organization and saying, here's an approach that's working that we want to try.
Yeah.
And I'd like you to just back off a little bit.
Well, so we have a very kind of strict way of having people referred to us. So not just anybody is eligible for the scholarship if they write in and they have a pressing need. It doesn't work like that because there's no way I can vet everybody. So what we have relationships with all of the clinical stabilizations and the halfway houses where you can't work, and Department of Corrections and drug courts. And they'll let us know when they see somebody who's made a significant change but has no one. So I'm very often, matter of fact, maybe once or twice, with a grandma that was living in a senior citizens community that couldn't help the grandson and had no money. But for the most part, I'm working with somebody when I'm doing working with the people with the scholarships. I'm working with somebody who doesn't have family. So that's usually not a problem because they don't have any family that's helping them, because most people can scrape together a couple $100s for somebody to get into sober living. But these are people that don't have that, and they don't have family either. I've had people where everybody, both parents died of an overdose, so he didn't have anybody. So these are situations where the person doesn't have anybody. So taking that away, and when I deal with them, as much as I'd like to be the recovery coach, well, not really, but I mean, as much as I'd like to fulfill that role, I can't, and it's not just because I'm not in recovery. It's because people, with the way my approach is, they look at me like mom. And when my daughter was getting well, the last person she wanted to get advice from was mom, no matter how much I knew. She needed somebody who had walked the same road and who that was their role. And that's why I think the recovery coach role in these scholarships, and I think the recovery coach role in general, because even if you're a parent and you're in recovery, you can't do this with your own child.
No, and they tell you that all the time too.
It just doesn't work. You need to stay as mom and dad if that's who you are. But I think it's really important what you're saying, and why I've started to coach parents on strengthening the family, and also understanding the disease and understanding what you can and cannot do. All of these things parents need help with too. And it's not enough to go to a therapist, because I have a wonderful therapist who knew nothing about addiction. And she started like one of the first methadone clinics in New York. So she didn't know about addiction. She didn't know what it was like to be a parent to go through this. And she didn't know about it now. So she was understanding of the disease, which was helpful. But she couldn't tell me that, there are meetings here, and here where you can go. This is, I'm gonna teach you about the disease of addiction so you know what's going on in your child's brain. This is, I'm gonna talk to you about post-acute withdrawal syndrome so you know what you're looking at. There's lots of things that parents don't understand. I'm gonna help them communicate to each other and to their child, because some of the things that I hear parents say, the hair on the back of my neck stands up. And I think to myself always, because of having so many times where my own child overdosed and I almost lost her, I think to myself, I think now in my whole life with everything, is that really the last thing I want to say to somebody? Because this is a deadly disease.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that our parents and everybody, addiction is a family disease. We hear that all the time. The family becomes just as sick as the person.
It's a game the whole family can play.
Yes. It's so much fun. But families become as sick as the person that has the disease.
Well, yeah, because you're traumatized.
I still have PTSD to this day. And I work on those things, myself. But I think everybody needs to work on these things because you get so immersed in trying to fix this person, which is not possible. And like you said, I don't even know really what that means, but I see a lot of people trying to do it. We become so busy trying to do that if we took a step back and looked at how, my book is called If You Love Me, A Mother's Journey Through Her Daughter's Opioid Addiction. I was out of my mind. I was crazy. I mean, really certifiably crazy. And I thought that I was doing a good job. And I had boundaries, but I had no emotional boundaries. I was available 24 hours a day. I was, she would call me and I would be immediately trying to fix things. And I didn't get it. I really did. And you can never really understand what another person is going through, how much pain they're in. And the name of the book actually comes from, there was a time when she had relapsed. Oh God, I don't even know how many times this was. And she was brought home by some sober friends, and she was sitting on the kitchen floor, and she was so disappointed in herself and disappointed for me and just broken. And I said, sweetheart, I love you so much. And here I am going to say a magical thing that like she's never heard before. I said, I love you so much, and you're going to die. And she looked up at me and she said, if you love me, you'd let me die. And that's still, I get goosebumps when I even say that, because that...
You're not the only one.
It was like that was the realest thing that anybody has ever said to me, because she was in so much pain, and I was only seeing what I wanted her to do and who I wanted her to be, and I wasn't acknowledging how much pain she was in.
Well, you didn't know.
I didn't know.
And that's the situation with a lot of people, is that you guys just don't know.
And even if I knew, even if I had had my own experience, it wasn't her experience.
No, exactly, and the pain's very different, and it's different for different people, right? And where you feel that, and what I try to explain to a lot of people too is that even in sobriety, right? I had no idea what my emotions were when I was first sober, right? And so you go through these anger periods where you're angry all the time,
right? But
is it really anger? It's the only label that I know how to put on it, right? So it gets very confusing, right? And this is not psychology or psychotherapy or psychiatry talking, right? This is experience, and as much as I hate to say it, it's like it's really kind of spiritual, right? I'm afraid, right? I have this underlying current of unfounded, ungrounded fear. So I'm either in fight or flight mode all the time, right? And the only label that I know how to put on how I feel right now is that I'm angry. So when you go to a therapist or to your mom or to a psychiatrist or whatever, and they say, well, what's wrong with you? Well, I'm angry all the time. But maybe you're not, right? It's the only label I know how to put on it. It's the only way that I know how to describe how I'm feeling right now. But how do I even know whether I've got that label right?
Yep.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
And what's really going on is that I'm scared out of my mind. Right? I'm afraid that I'm going to drink again. I'm afraid that I'm not going to be able to live. I'm afraid that I'm going to get kicked out of my housing. I'm afraid that everything that I thought about myself, that I'm unwanted, unneeded, and unloved, is going to come true. Right? And the more someone tells me, why can't you do this?
Oh, God, what a thing to say to somebody who's trying to do something that they're worried about that too.
But you don't even know what you're trying to do. Right?
Yeah.
I have no idea what this looks like. Right? And back to one of your points, because it made me think of this, and that whole idea of the communication stuff, and I think one of the more important things, and I don't want anyone listening to this to use this as a weapon, but one of the things that a guy in detox said to me is the last time I was in detox is he said, just remember you're going home a suspect and you're just going to have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's the other thing I hear is
But I think that's a good thing to say to somebody who's going, especially if they're going home. Because
I don't think it's a good thing for a mother to tell her son.
No, but I think no, I don't either. But I think it's a good thing for somebody to understand, because there's two sides to this. So there's a whole family that's just as scared as you are. But they don't have any jewelry left.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So we all have to
hide your wallets.
Right. It takes time to heal from all of these things.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that was the point he was making, right? Because I'll sit in meetings sometimes and I'll have this kid will raise his hand and he goes, I'm almost 3 months sober and my parents still don't trust me. It's like, well, of course they don't. You just put them through hell for the last 6 years. Right. And so that whole idea, and it's a two-way street, right? It's for me, it was having to understand that it was going to take some time to rebuild that trust, and that trust may never come, right? I was 43 years old when I got sober, and it wasn't until I was 50 that my parents stopped hiding the booze when I came over to their house, right? So it took a long time.
Yeah.
And they drink, not like I did, but they'll have and they wouldn't drink around me.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me uncomfortable because I wanted them to enjoy their lives,
Yeah.
And now, my mother called me 6 months ago. She goes, well, on your way up to Maine, could you stop at the New Hampshire liquor store and get me a bottle of Jim Beam?
Oh, she trusts you now.
And I was like,
she's sending you into the belly of the beast.
And I was like, you do realize that you just asked your alcoholic son to stop at the liquor store and get you exactly what he used to drink. Oh, I know. My mother's French, right? I think you're fine. It's like, well, we better hope so, Mom.
No, but that's good.
But yeah, but it takes time, right? And so your daughter has a little time under her belt now.
She does.
Right?
She does.
What's that looking like?
Well, she'll have 2 years, July 22nd. I truly believe that will happen on July 22nd.
That's a good chunk of time.
It's good. And she's, still putting her life back together, still trying to get to where she would be if that all hadn't happened, I think. But she's going to school, she's working, she got engaged, she'll be getting married was the best part. She got engaged for Christmas, and they're not getting married for almost 2 years because they wanted to save money. And I thought to myself, oh, this is good. Because, in years before, she couldn't wait 2 seconds for something, but this is a good sign. But, I had always hoped that I'd get some version of her back, because she had been through a lot, and spends, even now, quite a bit of time going to this wonderful therapist that she's found that helps her deal with her PTSD and trauma from all that happened while she was using. But I always hoped that I would get some kind of part of her back. The idea that I would really get her back seemed too much to hope for, but she's back. It took a while, and she still has rough days, but I am so grateful.
Yeah, well, it's how we're affected, right? It's getting to a point where that.
Yeah.
Right, that you're going to have rough days,
right,
and that you're just going to have to ride it out. And I used to love it, because I tell people this now, and I think it was a guy that I used to talk to, who had, I think he was 36 years sober, and he used to say, this whole thing about this too shall pass,
mm-hmm.
right? We always look at it as like the bad days.
Yeah.
That goes for the good days too.
That's true.
This too shall pass. And you just got to remind yourself of that it's kind of, I'm using my hands right now, but like early in sobriety, it goes up and down and up.
It's a roller coaster.
And then the longer you stay sober, it just kind of goes boom, 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 boom,
Right.
And, I just came off of like 2 miserable weeks for no other reason than I woke up one Wednesday and I, was miserable for 2 weeks. And
it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it happens to the best of us, but those of us that have certain coping mechanisms,
right?
Particularly early on in sobriety, it makes it difficult. And that's why I think your idea for the recovery coaching and stuff like that is an awesome idea, because I know what it felt like, right? I know what those first 2 years were like. I know what those first 5 years were like. I know what that first decade was like,
Yeah.
right? And I can go, I've been through this, I've been through this, I've been through this, and I stayed sober through it all, right?
I think, and because let's face it, most people start pretty young. If you've never had that experience where things get bad and then they get better, and you don't numb it, you haven't numbed it in any way, you have no experience to draw upon.
Right, but it's one thing for you to say that to someone, because if you had said that to me in the beginning, I'd be, well, what the hell do you know?
What do you know?
You
I know.
You weren't drinking behind dumpsters.
Well,
you know?
I was. I just stopped. I could stop.
You know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
You weren't drinking behind the dumpster that you called your house.
That's true. That's true.
That was home.
Oh God.
You know? So, do you want to plug your book? I'd like you to plug your book.
Yeah. So the name of the book is "If You Love Me: A Mother's Journey Through Her Daughter's Opioid Addiction." It's published by Macmillan, Henry Holt. It's available on in Amazon, any bookstores, pretty much. Even in the library, if you can't afford it, don't feel
Is
like
it EPUB too?
It is. It actually won for 2018. It was runner-up for Memoir of the Year, along with Michelle Obama was my other runner-up mate.
Good
So
God.
the book Educated won. Yeah. So if you want to hear it in my whiny Brooklyn accent, you can get it on Audible.
So it's on Kindle also.
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it's everywhere. And like I said, if somebody can't afford it, you can get it through the library. It's my story of my whole experience with my daughter. And when I finished the book, she was 3 days out of the last treatment center.
Wow.
So it's basically the story of, the difficulties, but now everybody knows the real ending. It's coming out in paperback at the end of the summer. And when it comes out in paperback, I'm going to do the afterward and tell people where she is now and what's going on with the rest of the people that are in the book too. So I know that, people always ask me that. Actually, people always, before they know what happened, always give me their condolences because they think that there's no way that she could have lived through that. And unfortunately, it's a very ordinary story because it's happening everywhere. So, and with having gone through this and all of the other many, many trainings I've done and intervention trainings, and I've begun to put together a family coaching practice. So I'm starting to see families and do that on Zoom meeting and in my office here in North Reading. So I'm doing that, and the podcast Collateral Damage, also the podcast Taking Back Your Life.
And Taking Back Your Life is?
Taking Back Your Life is going to be fun. We hope. I mean, there's nothing funny about this, but I found that when I could find a little humor in something, even if I was just laughing at myself, it just made me feel better. And I think that if you can't laugh, you have to find a way to laugh no matter how bad things are. And I did manage to do that, and so did my co-host is Katie Brennan Donovan, and she's also has gone through something very similar with her daughter. And the two of us together are going to kind of just sit down and talk about things, serious too, but it's, you got to laugh a little bit.
I think those are the best ones. It's like, when I think I may have had the conversation with you that I don't really conduct an interview. I just sit down and I talk to someone, right? And I think I like the format.
Who wants to who wants a clipboard out and answering questions? Nobody wants that.
Exactly. You said something interesting. Well, you reacted in an interesting way, and I want to see if you can remember how you reacted. Because you and I were talking, and sometimes it gets heated. Not between us. We're not contentious with each other, but we're both very passionate about what we do, and we get incensed at certain situations. And I mentioned to you how the medical and clinical field seem to think that we're fragile and easily triggered. The way you reacted that day was like so it wasn't. It wasn't.
I know what I was like. Those are the toughest people I've ever met.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
If you've gone through that, I always call my daughter my hero because she is. Yes, she's sensitive and she's kind and everything bothers her, but she's gotten through probably the hardest thing in the entire world to get through and has come out on the other side, and she's a magnificent person. That's that's not weak or fragile. That's like warrior. That's what that is.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing that always amazes me is that my house could burn down and I'd be like, okay. But I break a shoelace in the morning and that's the stuff that sets me off.
Yeah.
You know, that's the stuff. It's the little things that I can't, I can now. I mean, but early on, it was those little things. Because everything else, the huge stuff, I pretty much expected it. You know? So it wasn't a surprise. Murder, death, fire, car wrecks, everything. That was, par for the course.
Again?
I was pretty much expecting that, but, paper cut, that's just, my month is over, it's really weird the way we kind of react to stuff like that. So,
jeez.
Listen, believe it or not, we're coming up on an hour.
Wow, that was fast.
So yeah, I've got one more question I want to ask you, and I pretty much I try to ask everyone this, and I forget every once in a while. But is there anything that you wish I had asked you that I didn't, or anything you would have liked to talk about?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I'd like for people to know where to find Magnolia.
Absolutely.
And that's magnolianewbeginnings.org. And on there you can find the support groups and lots of information and hopefully connect with other people, because that was the best thing I ever did for myself, was to connect with other people that could say me too. And to educate yourself and continue to look for good, solid information from podcasts like this. And podcasts like the ones that I'm doing, that we're bringing people to shine a light on different aspects of this, and so that people feel less alone and they become more educated. And hopefully, with those two things together, we know what's possible and what's not possible. If people are looking for me directly, they can find me at maureencavanagh.net. That's Cavanagh without the U. Everybody always spells it with a U. I don't know why, but the right way to spell it is without the U.
I was going to say, because it's the right way to spell it.
So they can find me there, and I just, that connection, and it's so similar for both the parents and the family members and the loved ones, as it is for somebody who's struggling or in recovery, is connecting to people that understand what you're going through, and there's so many of us out there. That I think that that's probably the best bit of advice. Don't have to agree with me on my personal views on things, but connect to other people that are going through this.
Do you think it's made a difference?
Oh, I know it's made a difference. Yeah, it's definitely made a difference. I see it all the time. I wouldn't do it. We have no paid staff. I do this for free. You know how people say, well, I love this so much, I would do it for free. I really do this for free. So I know for sure the rewards are that I see people able to change their lives all the time.
Good. Well, Maureen Cavanagh, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show, and I appreciate your time. I really do.
Well, thank you, my friend, and I'm glad you're doing this. You're doing a good job, as always, and with your recovery binder. That's everywhere on Magnolia, too, so thank you.
All right. And all right, that's it. We'll wrap it up.
Good.